Hello, movie lovers. Welcome home. My name is Amy Henserling, and you're listening to Watch This List. This is the fifth episode, I believe, of Provocateur with my buddy Jerry, who you have actually chosen, I think, the director who best fits this description for good and for ill. So Jerry has picked someone who was a challenge for me and a director which their filmography was one that I was able to actually almost entirely complete too, which was really cool. So Jerry, actually, before we get into it, tell me what your introduction was to Tsai, because I don't think that I know why. I know that you love him and I know that you chose him because you want to talk about him, but how did you get introduced to him?
So I first saw Rebels of the Neon God, his first film, and I liked it. It was like even sadder Wong Kar-wai, like Wong Kar-wai on, I don't know, Ambien or something.
Depressed.
And
yeah.
yeah. And, but it's,
Downers.
as you know, it's not, it has, first of all, it has a score, a great score, by the way. That thing
great
gets stuck
score.
in my head. Yeah. I love that score. But it also has a lot of, for Tsai, a lot of dialogue. It has more of a kind of A to B plot. And so I really liked it. I like it about as much as I do now, which is to say, like, a lot, but I only have it at like 4 stars, which is high for me. But it convinced me to check out the rest of his films, though I did not know what way to go about it. So Ayush, the great Ayush on Letterboxd, had logged so many of them. And I asked him, I said, hey, man, I like this movie. I like his style, but what should I see next? Which I ask people all the time. And he said, you need to go chronologically. Like, he was very serious about it. And so I was like, okay, got it. Like, that's easy. It's not like I struggle a lot of times with authors, and I end up going chronologically most of the time. But I struggle with authors and other filmmakers where it's like, oh God, they have 15 movies, or God forbid they have 50 movies.
Yes.
So anyway, it was really easy. And I was like, okay, cool. So I'll watch his next movie, which has a French title. So I'm like, okay. So I went to that, and that's how I did it. I went chronologically. This was in 2022, I believe.
Okay, I was going to ask how long ago was it, and then what I would assume that it was immediate vibe for you, because you're big into vibes. You're big into kind of off kilter, unusual spaces. Foreign films too. I usually associate with you. You do a lot of foreign films.
Yeah, I like to globetrot a little bit cinematically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm going to be unprofessional and drink water throughout this, or else I'll die.
It's okay, Jerry. That's very apropos for Tsai to bring water into this.
Oh, well, yeah. So he's got motifs, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
What did you just ask me? I just brain farted. I'm sorry.
That you vibe. I would
just
assume
in general.
that you vibed with his aesthetic.
Yeah. So when I saw Vive l'Amour, I was like, this is different. This is not there's a progression here, but there's also a shedding of convention. Mm-hmm. And so to jump ahead a little bit, I found out recently, I did a lot of research, not I didn't take any notes, but I learned, because, okay, when I first went through, Tsai was really kind of a mystery. I didn't look at a lot of interviews. I didn't even know if there were that many. I knew his face. And so, but that was kind of it. And I realized that, so he got his start directing TV in Hong Kong. Or no, he might have directed, but he screenwrote, and I think he directed some teleplays or telefilms, whatever, episodes of TV. And he talked about, one time in an interview, he talks about how he did that and he can do that, but he doesn't want to just put forth a regular story. He doesn't want to be bound. He doesn't like being constrained. And so, in hindsight, that's immediately apparent with his sophomore feature.
Right. And it's also apparent that I think it's interesting that Rebels is so structured compared to Vive l'Amour.
And anything else he did, really.
And anything else. So it was actually very nice for me. Jerry had me start with Vive l'Amour first.
Because we didn't know how many you'd get to.
Exactly. And I thought I would only be able to watch 5 or so. And so, but I went all the way to Stray Dogs and then ended up putting in Goodbye Dragon Inn, and then went to Rebels. And I think that was a perfect end for me, just because I prefer lots of dialogue, point A to point B,
Yeah.
and so much in the middle, especially Stray Dogs, is just, you do not get that at all.
No.
It's almost meditative.
Stray Dogs is his most, like, it almost feels like it's a different thing. Like it feels like an installation at points, and like the end. I mean, we'll get to Stray Dogs, but yeah, no, it's very different from. I mean, if you take Rebels, which Rebels is like an art house movie or whatever. I mean, technically, it's not like watching like a whatever, like a Marvel movie or something. But if you take that and compare it to Stray Dogs, you know, Rebels looks like something you'd see on FX or something.
Yeah, well, and it's also, you know, it obviously reminded me of Rebel Without a Cause. So it's very young,
purposefully,
like,
I think.
Yeah, it's very teenager, angsty. Whereas Stray Dogs is like, I see them as such markers of, like, you know, Lee, his favorite actor that he uses, and his friend throughout the whole thing. Like, Lee is so old in Stray Dogs, and like you're basically watching this guy age through time, through the films. And so they're perfect. Like, it was great to go back and see it, like how young he was, and the whole movie just feels younger and more impetuous.
Yeah, and it both sort of jejune, if you will, and also still introspective. Like it's not naive,
right?
But it does feel youthful and
rebellious.
And juvenile for sure. Yeah, and rebellious, as it were.
Yeah. Right. And it seems like he something that I noticed was, for Rebels especially, I feel like he seemed to care a little bit maybe about making sense, and that sort of goes away. Not that his movies don't make sense, but I could feel the earnestness in Rebels that is not there for when we get to Wayward. It's like that he doesn't seem to care at all or be motivated by the idea of like reaching more people. It's just
no. Although ironically, Wayward was his biggest financial success at home or in Taiwan. He's from Malaysia, but you know, he's a Taiwanese filmmaker. But Wayward Cloud was the big, which is fun, and like because there's like a lot of sex and stuff. But like that movie is not sexy at all.
Not at all. Not erotic.
Like
I would. Yeah.
No, it's not erotic at all.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that, like when people say like in the realm of the senses, like Oshima's film, they'll be like it's pornographic, whether they're saying it in a good way or a bad way, and I'm like, dude, no. Porn is meant to titillate, and this movie is far from that.
Yes, it's I mean, it kind of reminded me. I know you love this movie, but we're going all over the place. But I have to say this, it's on my mind. Wayward's counter for me, since I didn't like it, is Love Exposure. In terms of, like,
I can see that.
They're both like, these directors are like bold and they're not shy. I mean, Love Exposure is so much erection talk and so much like just
comedically so.
Yes, but it's kind of that not soft core like Wayward isn't. But for me, I understood what he was saying with the characters, and there was some virtue there, and there was some like wholesomeness. That, you know, we'll get into that, but I think that Sono is maybe a good comparison point here, even though he's not as melancholy and like longing as Tsai is. They're both kind of using crazy stuff to get to like the heart of a conviction.
Yeah, so to me, like Sono would be like the kid running through the hall, like Naruto style in a high school, whereas like Tsai would be the kid like sitting there just like writing. And they both have like the same interests or similar. And also Tsai is I don't know if you know this, but he's a queer filmmaker technically. He's a gay man.
Yeah.
And I think that influences his films a lot. I think I read somewhere one time where he was like, I don't know how to film the female body. It's gross to me. Or I don't know I think he said
that
something
sense,
like
though.
that.
Yeah.
And when you watch his films, you can see that. And it's not like he's like objectifying the male body inversely or whatever, conversely, but he just, you can tell, but he's never like made a big deal out of it. I don't think he like really cares, but I think it does influence his work, especially The River and really just all through his work. So Rebels, definitely is more, straightforward. But Rebels has moments that I think set up his career. So and motifs. So you've got the water, which with Tsai, I think it's interesting to look at water as the duality of it. On one hand, it's a nuisance, it's a hindrance, it's floods, it is
drowning, like it can kill
or
you.
There's none of it,
or there's the drought, right?
But also it represents not only it represents vitality and it represents necessity, I think. And I think that's why I like Wayward so much, because there's a clear metaphor there of watermelon juice being like the sweet shit that you don't need, and water being like what you do need. I have more thoughts on that, but I'll save those when we get to Wayward. But yeah.
Well, and also it's like what our buddy Casey said about like that there's this image that Tsai had from childhood of being read this book about a woman escaping from the sea and like fish in the sea. So the mural in Stray Dogs is like there is this. I think it's not just like water in essence, although that's certainly part of it. It's always rainy. There's always wetness or dryness, but it's also this thing about the sea and like returning to a place where you belong, and that the characters have this lack of belonging in a world that's sort of indifferent to them. So I think there's
a ruinous world,
right? A dilapidated one that's like completely crumbling and falling apart. You're right.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot going on with the water part.
Yeah, and then also you have in Rebels cockroaches, which will come up again.
Yep.
You have
the haunted fourth floor. He said, "Oh, don't go up there; it's haunted."
And that's actually something I only really picked up on this watch. How the elevator always stops there. How he even says, "No, we're not there yet."
Right.
It has the awkward moments that would become more and more prevalent and more apparent. Like in Rebels, like he just kind of walks in on her while she's in the bathroom, and he's like, "Whoa," and then whatever. As opposed to like in, like What Time Is It There, when he walks into the guy in the bathroom, which is that whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
With the guy, like you don't even notice him. And remember when Shao Kahn's adjusting all the clocks in the clock store? He's standing right next to him. He's following him.
I know. Yeah.
I didn't notice that the first time.
Oh, I did, because I was like, I am that guy. That's why I noticed him, because I was like, I would be this guy being like, what are you doing with the clocks? And it's kind of intriguing. And then
he wants the same thing.
Right. Connection. I thought that was great. I mean, even though
brilliant.
And by that point, by the time I saw What Time Is It There, I was a little bit desensitized, so that when the bathroom scene happens, I was like, oh, all right, yeah, well,
that was your favorite, right?
It was my favorite. That one, I think, is okay. I will say What Time Is It There is my favorite of his films. My favorite moment, though, in any of them is the end of The Hole. Like,
oh gosh,
ceiling.
Yeah, where he pulls her up.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
literally transcendent. Very literally,
it's very and then they're dancing in the dream, but you have this feeling that like the fantasy can happen, and so that's the most hopeful that I think he gets. Period.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that while Tsai is not romantic, I think he's definitely very intimate in the sense of closeness. Now, whether that results in connection in the film, it usually doesn't, and with viewers, it's subjective. But I think he's a very intimate filmmaker. I think he's trying to reach you.
I think he is romantic, Jerry, and I actually,
okay,
I do. I mean, he's so very focused on sensory, like,
maybe not romantic in as in romance poetry, but romantic in the sense of, okay, I can see what you mean.
Like, okay. Since I'm fresh, Ang Lee is like romance saga type of person. Like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is a romantic, like Age of Innocence, Scorsese. I don't mean that way, but I mean like
that's what I was thinking of initially. So, but I can see what you mean.
Right. It's more that like he is aware that like touch and closeness can heal people, and that the lack thereof really screws them up. I think that's
Yeah.
maybe what I mean.
And no, I agree, and I think that he struggles with the conundrum of, I said this in my Vive l'Amour review, the second one, but it's proximity doesn't equal closeness for sure.
Right.
It can, and I think as his work goes on, it gets closer to that. Like, you didn't watch I Don't Want to Sleep Alone, and we're not going to talk about that because that's not in the Shao Kahn thing, but that film is very much does achieve a proximal closeness, as so to speak.
Right. I think, honestly, Vive l'Amour is the one, now that I've seen a bunch of them, Vive l'Amour is the one to me that best illustrates how people can be very, very close physically and have like no intimacy whatsoever. Like, they don't know each other. They're just going through the motions. It's just physical. And there's an alienation there that's almost palpable. Like the scene in Vive l'Amour where they're having sex on the mattress without sheets, and then the guy underneath is jerking off to that. It's like, okay, this should,
and he sleeps under that mattress all night.
Right.
That's
but
uncomfortable
that should technically
as shit.
Be,
but like,
well, and I think them doing it on the mattress with no blankets is also, so the whole thing is just like, so it's so stripped of any sort of like intimacy. Like I just think that Tsai understands
it's intimate
that.
without being intimate, as it,
right?
Like, it's intimate in terms of closeness, but it's not intimate in terms of lit candle and a Teddy Pendergrass song,
or meaning. Yeah. It doesn't mean anything to them,
despite the thirst, literally and figuratively, that they have for meaning and for not satisfaction, but for satiation spiritually.
What would you even say? Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of a scene where people are making out or doing whatever? Because in these movies, they do a lot. Yeah. Inside, where you felt that it was meaningful, or is there any scene like that where, I know what you're going to say.
There is. For it. I don't even know that you watched it, but yes, there is. And I don't blame you either.
I know what you're going to say, though. But go ahead and explain this for people who've seen the end of Wayward Cloud.
Yeah, so, okay. The end of Wayward Cloud is incredibly upsetting. According to Tsai, the girl's not dead. She's unconscious for whatever reason. Doesn't make it any better.
Worse. Yeah,
I was going to say, it doesn't make it any better. Yeah. So and I think a lot of that is a commentary, though, on the porn industry and like the subjugation of bodies. It almost reminded me of late Pasolini in a way. In fact, the consumption, themes, I think that's a through line between the two of them, though they're like so different. Both gay men. I mean, you could draw that line too. But thankfully, Tsai, I think, in real life, I don't think he has any character flaws, unlike Sono, like you mentioned earlier, and Pasolini.
Right, where they're actually abusive. Right.
So I can stand Tsai and not feel bad about it. Okay, so but the end of Wayward Cloud, it's so hard to even talk about. I guess he rapes this unconscious body, and it's doesn't make it any better or any less fucked up, but it's a metaphor, for many things. Subjugation of women's bodies, the porn industry. But his girlfriend is looking behind this window, and it's a long scene, uncomfortably long. And as he approaches a crisis, so to speak, he stands up and he just sticks it in her mouth. And that to me is the most meaningful moment, most like intimate in terms of like light a candle and love. Oddly enough, somehow, some way, moment in his filmography, which is just so weird and so gross. But it is. It is.
Scylla kind of explained this because I was kind of like, I fast forwarded this thing. And so I had a general idea of what was going on, and I read what was going on, but I just didn't want to put it in my head. But Scylla had said, like, this is the way for them to sort of come to life, or like, where they were kind of dead inside. And so they had to go to great lengths to feel something or feel anything. And so that's why I kind of put that Wayward Cloud for me in that category of like Cronenberg's Crash, where it's like these people are deadened to life, and they're going to extreme lengths to feel something.
Yeah, and I think too that Wayward Cloud is such a complex film because I think my favorite moment in that movie is when Lee goes to her house. I can't remember her character's name. I think it's probably just her real name.
What time is it there?
But he goes to her apartment. Yeah, well, and she and the other female actress, the two younger ones, are all through, and then the older actress, and I hate that I can't remember their names, but I'm not a native Mandarin speaker. But the older woman of the three plays a mother surrogate, and then the older man who's he plays like the father figure. But with Wayward Cloud, he goes to her apartment and she hands him this big glass of watermelon juice. And she's so like happy to treat him, to be, a convivial. I never remember the term. Hospitable. Yeah, there you go. And he smiles and takes it, and she goes back into the kitchen, and he waits to make sure she's not going to come in, and he goes and dumps that watermelon juice out the window.
Right.
Because he's like, listen, I care about you. I like you. This is not just because the opening scene is him doing this weird watermelon porn thing. Yeah. By the way, when it cuts to, as one does, when it cuts to him with the watermelon on his head, having sex with that girl, I laughed hysterically both times that I've seen the film.
Jerry,
that is hilarious. Well, no, the first few minutes are gross and ugh. But for some reason, when he's got it's all sticky. But when he's got the watermelon on his head and he's going at it, that is one of the funniest, darkly funny. And it falls off at one point. I mean, you can't say he doesn't have a sense of humor, warped as it may be.
Well, and you said that this movie, what did you call it, absurdist, or how would you characterize in terms of like the tone? I mean, obviously it feels a little bit apocryphal even to me, like end of the world.
And a lot of his movies have that. The Hole definitely is probably the clearest example, but yeah, no, it's definitely absurd, and it's not to me taken literally, which sounds like a cop out to do like gross shit.
Yeah,
it may be.
It was only a dream,
but no. I think it was very much reality.
I'm saying movies that do that are like it's a cop out because then you can do whatever you want because you're like it's only a dream.
Like you said on the Victor episode, only Lynch can get away with that.
Only Lynch and Mulholland, yeah. Sorry, spoilers.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Mulholland Drive,
if you haven't seen Mulholland Drive, you're not listening to me and Jerry
talk about Tsai Ming-liang. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's definitely absurdist, and I think that the musical numbers punctuate that even more so than in the Whole, because in the Whole they're, I wouldn't say minimal or minimalist, but they're not. I mean, in The Wayward Cloud, they're almost like old Hollywood, like before the Hays Code, like way back. They reminded me of someone, because like Presley loves the old musical numbers where it's like a crazy spectacle of like, they'll have like 100 women with one leg in the air and it looks like a thing, or the stuff I'm talking about. I haven't seen any of those movies, but Presley showed me clips. That's almost what it reminded me of, especially the number with all the umbrellas. Mm-hmm. Which I assume was a Umbrellas of Cherbourg reference, maybe.
Cherbourg. Mm.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard. Well, I think for me, the Hole's musical numbers are very emotionally resonant because she's fantasizing about what a good life would be like, and how it's kind of an externalization of how she feels inside, right?
Her wanting, her yearning for something better.
Yes. And so it's very sweet and kind of pure, whereas Wayward's musical numbers are just like, what? And the bathroom scene, you're just like, what am I watching? Like
the 16 Tons cover? Yeah.
It's hard to like...
With the big... Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to process what's happening. So it's...
I think that's a direct, like, there's a direct correlation there, because like The Hole's not necessarily a piece of like kitchen sink realism. It's definitely also absurd.
Right.
But like,
right. But
I think
feels more real.
Tsai is trying to set the stage for like, hey, don't take this seriously or don't take it that seriously.
Uh-huh.
I think also that he really doesn't like constraints. In fact, I know he doesn't because he talked about it. So I think that the Wayward Cloud is I think that the Wayward Cloud on one hand, and then Stray Dogs on the other, and then even Days, which we won't really get into because it's not part of the Shao Kahn thing, but Stray Dogs and Wayward Cloud are both like the most extreme examples of him like shedding convention, bucking constraint, like being like, no, I'm gonna do my thing, and it's weird or it's really contemplative or whatever. But like, yeah, and I think that the musical numbers, I mean, even the first musical number in the Wayward Cloud, it's Li
With the
Kangshang
fish.
in as like a fish in
Or
like
a merman or something.
and so
Yeah.
and like, but the reason that is one of my favorite Tsai movies is moments like the watermelon juice, or after that number when the bubbles come out of her sink and then they come into her room and we have this like low shot looking at her bed with her on it, and then the bubbles coming, and then the watermelon floating down. Like that's the film to me that has the most like little moments that move me, despite how absurd it is, despite how like not to be taken whatever it is literally, definitely not literally.
Do you find it though that it is somewhat like I don't think any of the movies that I saw besides Wayward felt so disjointed from scene to scene. Like, do you feel, because it seems like it's just, I don't want to say random,
Yeah.
but where it seems like every scene is something within itself, and that we don't really have like, I don't know,
Continuity?
there's like, yes. It's
So
just
yeah,
like,
I do.
Now this happened. Okay, now he's in a bathroom and he's whatever, and now he's, and there's a lot of,
No, I
random.
do. I do, and I think that that's another, continuity is a constraint in a way. If you're whatever, you really
Yeah.
want to do. I think that, and I think that that's a through line. I think Stray Dogs is even more so. I think there's no continuity in Stray Dogs at all. I think that Stray Dogs is almost vignette-ish in a way. Like it's
That's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah, but so yes, I do think Wayward Cloud has that. For me personally, I think Wayward Cloud is actually pretty, like, I can trace it, but I think that I can recognize that it's doing that, and that it's there's such a through line in his work. So like, we were talking about Vive l'Amour, and that movie ends with a woman crying. And I found it very interesting. You compared it to Irreversible, which I have not I have not revisited, but I have seen.
Okay. I was about to say the pleasure of watching, but it's not a pleasure to watch.
Yeah.
The reason I thought of that at that stage, because I didn't know that Tsai was going to keep doing this over and over. So obviously it's not as unique as I thought, but the lady crying or the girl crying on the bench is just a long, the camera's just sitting there, and it's several minutes long, not as long as Stray Dogs. And then, he does this again, but,
he does it a lot. Yeah.
Irreversible. The rape scene is like, I think it's 9 minutes, a little over 9 minutes. The camera's static, and we're just watching this
and
happen.
On the floor, right? Or not high off the floor. It's almost like you're a child watching.
Well,
this,
and the way Irreversible is genius, in my opinion, constructed, because when we're introduced to the film, it's going crazy. The camera is crazy, like it's on crack. It's just like
going through that like weird BDSM club or whatever it is.
The rectum. Yeah, and it's
is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's all over the place, and then it comes out, and then all of a sudden it's static. And I remember feeling queasy at the beginning of the movie, being like, "Can you please put the camera down?" And then as soon as it was still, I was like, "No, move the camera, like
pick it back up again, please."
So that's genius. I mean, that's but for this moment, it's kind of agonizing, because I feel like, I don't know if you agree, I feel like Tsai is very voyeuristic, and that he puts the camera as much as he's like, okay, as much as he doesn't
disagree.
Okay, go ahead. I want to hear your opinion on this before I continue. Go ahead.
So like literally, yeah, like technically, but I don't think it's from like a point of view. So he said something once about how his films are like moon gazing, and if you gaze at the moon, you'll like his films, and if you like his films, you probably gaze at the moon. And I personally do. especially if it's big and bright and full. I'm a smoker, so I'm always outside at night.
I was about to say you're always outside.
Yeah. And I'll go out and take a look at the moon, and the moon is the same. Well, it waxes and wanes and full and new, but it's the same whether it's 100 degrees and in July or it's -10 in February.
Okay, but Jerry, I mean by voyeuristic as in it feels like we're watching things that we should not be watching. Like
100%.
Like snooping, like peeping Tom sort of where we're like, oh, watching somebody sob on a bench feels intrusive to the personal space, dignity of the person. So there's just this uncomfortable feeling, even though you feel compassion, it's hard to watch because it seems so like she should be shielded from other people seeing her like this.
Yeah, and I agree. I do agree. And I think that that's reflected even in, isn't there a man sitting either in front of or behind her during that? So there's a spectator in the scene.
Right.
But yet yet there's emptiness as well. I mean, it's the two of them in this huge park, which probably is a shopping mall now.
Yeah.
Or
he said a lot of those places he filmed don't exist, which is why Skywalk is gone is good.
Yeah.
Because he's basically, it's the short film between What Time Is It There and Wayward sort of connecting them is that the place where he sold watches is gone.
Yeah.
And
then
like,
but in Wayward, place? There's like he finds like a different Skywalk or like a weird bridge or something. So he clearly has like an affinity for that architecturally.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So the river. I need to know, because I know that the end, and you can talk as much or as little about this movie as you want, but I just need to know what you thought overall before that, because you didn't review it and you didn't rate it, which I understand. Probably just wanted to get it out of mind. But now that you've had some time to like reflect on the rest of it and maybe how the end does relate to it, I just want to hear your thoughts on that one.
Well, Jerry, okay, I would say if somebody asked me like, what should I start with? I do think that you starting me off with Viva l'Amour and then directly the river made it so that nothing could touch those. I think that was probably wise. If somebody starts with Wayward, I think you'd be completely thrown off.
Oh no.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
That's like the nostalgia for like Tarkovsky. Like if you told if like they'd be like, what? This Russian guy's in Italy? What?
Or like, I also think nobody should start with River. I mean, not River, Mirror. I think Stalker is the best entry point.
Stalker or Ivan's Childhood, because it's so, again, conventional, even though it's
conventional,
not,
accessible. Okay. The River is about a kid who is like in insane, agonizing neck pain, which first, that's like the main thing that's hard to watch this movie, because another, I don't know if you'd call it a motif, but another characteristic of Tsai films is that you feel like things are very visceral. You feel like you can smell things. You feel like you have things on you, that there's water leaking.
Yeah.
There's like bugs. And so the neck pain of the river is really, really, really hard to watch because the guy just can't get a break.
It's funny. When I first watched that movie, believe it or not, I had slept wrong or whatever, and I had a slight crick in the back of my neck, and I had no idea that's what was happening. That's what was going to happen.
Right.
So
The
River is not my favorite. I mean, I love it. I love all Tsai's movies. I don't have a single one rated less than 4 stars, but I do have that rated 4 stars, and I put it in the bottom tier for sure. Bottom is relative.
Right.
But yeah, no, it is hard to watch, and it's hard to watch him just go through from chiropracting or
I know.
I don't know how you going to a chiropractor to
adjusting,
like the thing where he's like they're like slapping it, and then like where they're putting the things in it and where they're doing spiritual stuff. Nothing works.
Nothing works
because nothing can go ahead.
Well, right. So nothing can like heal the pain basically. So there's that component, and then there's like, I guess it doesn't matter to spoil it, but so there's father-son stuff going on where the father goes to this bathhouse and I guess he does it to other people or they do it to him. There's sexual stuff going on with men, okay, for his father. And then sort of the end scene, the son is trying to get relief by going to one himself, and you're kind of like, oh well, good, because this poor guy has been through so much. You kind of want some sort of like relief for him. And then it turns out that it's his father, and I literally almost threw up. Like, I just felt so disgusted. And I also was kind of angry at Tsai because I felt like that was very unnecessary. So I don't know. It was a combination of being very, very like appalled, but then also being like, why was this there? And so that angered me.
There's a couple things. His father does go to those places, but throughout the movie, I think we only see him twice before, maybe only once. He's seeking
engage.
He's seeking that, but no one, whatever his qualifications are, is right. I also think that despite the fact that we can see it, it's pitch black in there.
I know,
because you have to light it so we know what's going on. But I think it's pitch black. If not, then because I don't think, why is this here? And I'll explain why.
Okay, because I was
but if he could see him, if he knew, then I would say, why is this here? But I think it's important to like note that it's lit so that we can tell. But he doesn't know. I think it's a tragedy. No, yeah. Right. I think it's a tragedy. I think it's also, so real life plays a big part in Tsai's film. So first of all, Shao Kang, Shao just means little. Jeffrey Chan on Letterboxd informed me of that. It translates to little. So Shao Kang just means little Kang. I assume his dad was Big Kang or whatever. But that's just what he's called, I guess, in real life. And he's very short. I mean, he's very short. I don't know how short, but yeah. So, whatever that's his name. And so actors go by their real names, usually, if they have a name. And like in real life filming Rebels, he had a neck thing, and it's actually come back multiple times throughout his life. And also, I know both of their fathers passed before, what time is it there? But I think Tsai's father had passed after Rebels came out. So there's some really, off the beaten path reflection stuff there. I don't want to assume anything about his sexuality coming into play for that scene. I don't think that matters, because I don't find it sexual in the sense. I think it's the same thing as Wayward Cloud.
Where you feel like this is like an allegory, like we're talking about, like if we get into like mythology and Oedipus and how people are with.
Well, yes,
parents.
But I think also, so there's an intimate scenes, and intimate in terms of closeness, of Shao Kahn riding the bike and his father holding his head up, which I find so wholesome and so beautiful. But you can tell throughout the film that their relationship is very strained, very detached, very like, and if we assume that it's the same people as from Rebels,
I was about to say that the mother says to him that he's reincarnated as the neon god, and that's why they don't get along.
Yeah.
So they did already set it up, I suppose, and they're the same actors. Yeah. So it's like, you guys don't get along, and you should, and you need to realize this. And there is that strain there, but
it could be perhaps a matter of fate or coincidence or whatever, God getting fed up with their inability to connect and saying, you're gonna connect. It's not gonna be great.
Well, but the reaction to it is just like the same as mine. I mean, where he's like horrified, and then the idea that like his son is his type is also extremely disturbing. Yeah. And then, it's got, I don't know, I feel like maybe if I had known, well, I don't know, it's hard to say, but this is kind of like, if you can get through that movie and you are like interested in what this guy is saying and what he has to say, because I will say, obviously, there's some boldness here. There's like Scylla was saying, like he's brave. And he's obviously wrestling through some unresolved stuff. But for me, it was pressing. I was like, Jerry, I don't know if I can do this, because then it was like, oh, what's Wayward Cloud going to have?
Well, and thankfully, now see, if every film did that, I would think that it would be the effect would be, it would become just like shocking for shock value, and it would lessen the value, I think, of having those things. I think that let's see, Rebels doesn't do it. Vive l'Amour doesn't really do it. The River does it. The Hole doesn't do it.
No, The Hole and What Time Is It There were very clean comparatively.
Yeah. Cloud does it, and
Stray Dogs doesn't, and then
Stray Dogs doesn't, but it does. It does it in a different way, and I think that's why it's his greatest film. We'll get there, but it Stray Dogs opts for a different kind of.
You're talking about what? The cabbage?
No, the cabbage is just. I'm talking about the last two shots. I think those have a much more profound effect and a more visceral effect than anything. I have so many thoughts on Stray Dogs. Let's not go there yet.
Okay, so I went from the good thing was that I went from The River to The Hole, and The Hole is like more standard, if you want to call it that. It has like a plot, and it's got the nice disparity between the terrible life that's like alienated and things are just crumbling around and society is suffering, to the fantasy musical numbers that are bright and happy and catchy. And so that one was a good upswing from the bleak.
It's also only like 90 minutes or less.
True. It's quicker. Yeah, I think that The Hole is very romantic. It almost reminded me of something that like Damien Chazelle would enjoy. So it's got a dreamy quality to it, and that was a really nice pickup from the bleakness of The River.
And everything with like Shao Kahn and the cat. And I get so sad when the cat he loses him. He like loses the cat. You know, he's trying to carry him out of there. And but also The Hole has a moment that's very, very like ugh to me, and it's the guy crawling around into that hole.
Oh yeah,
the hole.
Yeah, as a cockroach.
Yeah, and then later she does it. I love though that like it's like this last ditch effort of humanity. She literally, the movie's never been restored, so I don't know what all that crap is in her house. She has a lot of one thing.
Yeah,
I almost thought it was diapers, but like that.
Yeah, or like newspapers. It's definitely,
or like something in like plastic, like some sort of.
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Grocery.
Where she's on the phone and she says, "Do you know what women really want?" And she pulls out the. Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So whatever's piled up in her home, she like I think she like reaches a hand out, or if it's not like, you know, she comes out from being basically getting the illness, and for like a last ditch effort, and then he gives her the water, and then after she drinks the water, he hands it back up, and then he just, you know, when he puts his hand back down again to say, "No, come, like I gave you what you needed." And I could leave you, but now I want more. Like more as in like I want to help you beyond just giving you water to live. That's so powerful, I think. Well,
and that's kind of the ending that you'd want from The River, and he doesn't get it.
No, and I think that's purposeful. I think I think The River. I can't imagine what headspace he was in. But it was probably it's definitely his darkest film, I think, despite the fact that Wayward Cloud is perhaps more like visceral and like in your face. I think that The River seems like the work. Now, I don't know. He could have been happy as, you know, a pig in slop, but I don't think so. I think
that it's his grieving. Antichrist.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you want to, like, cause that's like Lars's lowest. He's made low things, but Antichrist was like his lowest point.
Yeah, I have a complicated relationship with him. We won't get into that.
The point is, they're trying to wrestle, like they're trying to exorcise it. I think maybe, like they're trying to get out the depth of pain that they're in. Perhaps
this end of The River is a way for him to reconcile in some way, not literally, I hope, his father's death, or maybe I don't want to speculate on that. I don't think it's like a
Jerry. Don't you think in I think What Time Is It There is great.
I do.
As far as no, but I mean in terms of him going through his father's grief. I think that is that movie.
Well, the stages of grief too. I mean,
and
I don't know what they
types
are,
of grief.
Yeah,
like with his mother and thinking that he's coming back. So you have one character who's like trying to prepare and make everything so that her dead husband can return. And then the son has no idea how to cope with it. And then you think that it's a little bit crazy, but then the dad actually picks up the suitcase and walks to the
What
Ferris
a great
wheel.
last shot.
I love that last shot. Now,
Yeah.
that's partly why I love that movie so much, because I think that's the best ending that he's ever done. I know you like Stray Dogs, though. But to me, that final is very...
So framing's very
classic.
important to him. We haven't talked really about his technical stuff. And I meant to get his DP's name, but I did not. But he, I'm very unprofessional. But he,
You're fired.
Yeah, you're fired.
You're fired.
Framing means a lot to him in composition. And he said something in an interview about how if the framing isn't right, if the image isn't right, then why would you continue to watch? Which I think is very important. I think, do you remember the opening of Wayward Cloud? That shot sticks in my mind.
Oh yeah, I do.
It's like,
how could it not?
Yeah, it's like, no. Oh, I don't know if that comes... Does this watermelon weirdness come first?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Is that the opening? Okay, well, I'm talking about the shot where it's like the camera's like almost... It looks like it's on the roof, and there's like these split hallway.
Oh,
or like perspective is doing something weird. I thought that came first, but it might come after.
Maybe it did, but I thought it opened with her on the bed.
It's hard not to think about that as the opening, whether it is or not. I can't remember. But yeah. Yeah. No, but that shot, and it does something with perspective too, where the camera's so high up that it looks like the hallway is like it comes to like a weird like convex or something.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about now. Okay, Wayward opens with, it's almost like it's in a parking garage. That's what you're talking about, right?
That does. Okay. That is the first shot,
and it
right?
just sits there. That is the first shot, and it just sits there.
So.
I completely forgot that because I had no idea why that was there. I remember thinking, like, why are we looking at this?
So the Japanese woman who does the pornographic films passes by the woman who Lee's girlfriend who went to Paris, and what time is it there? They pass each other.
Okay.
And they don't know each other. I mean, and the fact that this is all going on in the same building, excuse me, I think a floor of difference, although geographically it's kind of like The Shining in that sense. It doesn't really make sense because she, at the end, they go, it seems like it's on the same floor. I don't know. It's very disorienting.
No, I know what you're talking about. It's also Viva l'Amour, where there's this, if we want to talk about proximity again, but like the reason that the character doesn't kill himself is because he hears them in the next room. So there is a lot going on with just placement, spaces. I think Tsai is very, and that's another reason why I really liked What Time Is It There, because part of it was in Paris, and it was really nice to
refreshing
get out. Honestly, yes, and I really liked that. Obviously, isolation, being in a busy urban area is a theme. So to see it how it is where they are, and then see how it is in France is very cool. I liked how they were different levels of isolation because she couldn't speak the language. Yeah,
and the moment where she meets the other Chinese woman or Taiwanese, I don't know, they both Mandarin speakers. That is like such like a for her. Like
I know,
and I'm not very well traveled, but I've never gone anywhere that way I don't speak the language. But I can't imagine the relief. That must be like just like lifting of thousands of pounds off of your chest. Like,
literally, I lived in China for graduate school, and when I remember vividly, I was walking to this restaurant called Lush, which had burgers. So
great name. I love the band.
Oh yeah. I was walking there, and I saw this woman, and she was like, ah, and like we both screamed. It's just because she was white, and because like I knew that she spoke English.
Yeah,
she knew I spoke English because of the way we looked. And
wouldn't it have been ironic if she was a French woman?
Well, that would have been hilarious, because then it would be like, never mind, we're not excited to see each other. But that feeling is so real. I wrote about this in my review too for this, where she is in that dark alleyway and she sees a woman and she like runs up to her because she's trying to make sure that like she's like, oh, thank God, like a woman, and it's dark, and all these things are just very primal almost, where you're just like,
That reminded me of a film. It's Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I think it's called At the Ends of the Earth. Probably botching that title. It's later from him. And there's a scene where a Japanese woman, she does like reality show. I won't get too far into this, but she's in like I don't know where the hell she is, somewhere in I think the Middle East. And she doesn't speak the language. She's totally isolated, and she's like away from her crew. She's like on her own, and she's like going through this alley, and like men aren't like following her, or maybe they are. I mean, as a man, I can't imagine that scenario, but I'm sure it happens all the time. Every woman on earth has probably experienced it, and that captures that really well. But that's the same thing, I think, as what time is it there? That moment where I don't even think anyone's even, I don't think there's a question of anyone following her.
No, there wasn't. But just seeing a woman was like, oh, thank goodness. And I know what that feeling is. And then also being in a foreign country, like when she is in the restaurant and she's like, is there a menu in English? You know, and she's trying to just order food. It's these simple things that I just felt like that film in particular, that because that's a different level or layer of alienation. Not just like, it's one thing to feel alone being in your own surrounding. It's another thing to feel alone because you can't talk to anybody, literally.
Yeah. So. And I think it's so interesting how a lot of times Tsai's female characters are going through a similar yet different thing than Lee. It's usually Lee. It's very interesting. His I don't think anyone can say he doesn't know how to write women. Although he doesn't really write anybody. I mean, in that sense. But
yeah.
I don't think his female characters are sidelined for Shao Kahn's story. Who's his muse for sure. Now apparently they live near each other in abandoned like apartment buildings. I read that somewhere. It's totally platonic. I believe Shao Kahn is a straight man. But also, I follow him on Instagram, and he is like the most stylish guy. He's like in his 50s or whatever. Yeah. He wears like Balenciaga. His shoe game is crazy. It's so crazy.
That is wild. I would have never thought that.
No, he's like super stylish, and like I love him. I repost him all the time.
Oh, I wish they would make a movie where we could see that side. Because he's always homeless or like
or
squatting.
in I Don't Sleep Alone, or I Don't Want to Sleep Alone, he plays two characters. One is homeless and one is like he's totally paralyzed, like as in like can't move, can't talk, can't like he can blink, but that's it.
He just puts him through the ringer. If I were Lee, I'd be like, dude, can you please like... I
was talking to Presley about his movies. She hasn't seen any of them. We do want to watch the whole together. I think she'd enjoy that. I was telling her, like, can you imagine like being Shao Kahn and getting these scripts, which are very loose, I'm sure, but they hit, or just on the day of being, and like, yeah, you're gonna fuck a corpse or an unconscious person,
pee
whatever
into
it is,
a water bottle, or
repeatedly, or eat a cabbage like really intensely. Really? They had like, oh, okay, I'm saving.
Let's get to Stray Dogs. This is a good time.
Yeah,
go for it.
Okay,
I do like the cabbage scene because I feel like that's the most emotional, cathartic part of the entire movie.
I don't agree per se. It's the second most.
Oh right, you love the ending. Go ahead.
Well, no, that's not what I'm going to talk about either.
Oh,
the scene for me that is like earth shattering in the context of his filmography is the close up where Shao Kahn is holding the sign, as he does a lot in the film, and it's a close up on his face.
And he's singing.
That's the first time he's ever raised his... There are a lot of first times in Stray Dogs. That's the first time he's ever raised his voice. Not the first time he sings it. The second time. And he's not screaming or shouting. But he is... That's the most emotion we've ever seen from him. And it gives me the chills. That gives me the same effect that Marilyn Burns at the end of Texas Chainsaw does. Which one's like 100 and one's only like 10. But for Tsai, that's like 100. And for Shao Kahn, that's like 100. Texas Chainsaw's fresh in my mind, so I thought about that. But I got the same chill that I always get at the end of Texas Chainsaw. I got that same chill from the Stray Dog scene both times that I've watched it. And that's the first time he ever raises his voice. And he's hardly ever speaking anyway.
And he's crying. I mean, it's so... Yeah, you're right. I think that was, I don't even know what I would compare that to necessarily, because it's almost like he's coming to terms with that he'll never be more than he is, or that there's this tremendous loss of life, and like that it'll never happen, and he's just.
I wish I could remember the words, but he says like
It sounds like poetry.
Shocks of my... Yeah, it's probably some Eastern poetry, I would imagine.
Okay. Yeah.
No, it definitely is. Because even though I can't remember the words, because my memory's shot. I do know that like there are like Eastern either gods or names in the poem. I should actually look that up
for sure. I think he even says Shakespeare or something at a certain. I mean, I remember thinking like that it sounded less like a song and more like a poem. But
definitely.
But he is like, yeah, it is very powerful, and it made me think like, oh, like when we're driving around and we see people like wanting money or on the streets, like you have no idea what
I'm
they're
so
going
bad
through
because I want to help, like, and I can't. Like, not only because I'm not in a position to help really, but also just because like you can't help everyone. It's so hard. It's so hard and painful to see anyone, even if like cynical me comes out and I'm like, well, that they're just like they're not really, because a lot of times they're not, sadly.
Or they could be addicts and you give them money and then they go
And they
get
use
drugs or so I'm not saying, anything, but it is a very complex situation. And I think that
for sure, so complex.
Any film that makes you think twice and reassess your instinctive reaction to the lack of humanity, it's a reflection of our own. Like if we have a lack of humanity towards other people because we think that they're less human, we're less human for thinking that. Is how I see it.
Definitely.
So anything that sort of holds up a mirror and says this person could be standing on a corner and they've got 2 children that they're trying to take care of and we don't know how they got there. I don't know. For me, that's a positive takeaway from that.
100%. And I think that Tsai talks about in an interview how cinema rarely changes the world, if ever. He talks about a Russian war film that won the Palme d'Or in 1957. I would assume that's The Cranes Are Flying, from the context that I got. Is that 57? Is that Cranes Are Flying?
I don't know, but I can look it up for you. Keep talking.
Yeah. Whatever the case, that's what I think it is. But he said, that's a great film. It means so much to me, but yet we still have war. You would think that after some, and for me, like Come and See would be that example, or even like Full Metal Jacket in a different way. But yet we still have war. We still have all this. So, but I think that Stray Dogs for me is like one of the most effective, like, I wouldn't call it like a leftist film or anything, but like it makes me think and feel so much more than any like Godard thing where there's like middle-class Parisians talking about Mao or whatever. Like that does nothing like, for me.
I know. Or
and I don't think that I like La Dolce Vita, but stylistically. But yeah. I hate 8.5, so we could go there. But
I hate that too.
Yeah,
no,
I'm with you. I'm not 8.5.
Yeah, I'm not like I don't love the pretentious like rich people lamenting their lives or just like.
And like I hate people saying like I'm sure someone would. In fact, I read like on the Wikipedia page for Stray Dogs, some white American guy was like, "This is like Asian miserableism," and I was like, "Bro, you don't shut the fuck up." Like, first of all, it's not what it is. Like, disrespectfully. Like, dude,
no, disrespectfully.
Calm down. Like, you're out of your element. Like, it's not that does exist. Mm-hmm. Like, I would say that some of I don't know if you know Pedro Costa. He's oh God, where is he from? I want to say, no, it can't be Lebanon. I don't know. It doesn't matter. He's from a place where there's a lot of poverty. And he has a film called In Vanda's Room, which I actually like a lot. But like the rest of his films feel very like poverty porn, as they call it. Despite like the fact that there's still like a lot there. Misery porn, whatever. Yeah. I don't think Stray Dogs is that at all.
I think that the way that he does it shows that it's not. Because his films do not feel preachy. They just feel like they are what they are, and you may be kind of confused, or you may be like at a loss as to what he's saying. But none of them feel. Wayward feels a little bit aggressive to me, but it doesn't feel preachy for some reason. I just think that the tone is not there where I feel condescended to from him.
No, you can accuse Tsai of you can accuse Tsai of many things, but pedantry is not one of them.
No, Right. And I think even if you were dead wrong and you were talking to him about something, he would not be like, actually.
Yeah, no, in fact, he said like, it's such a subjective experience. It's all about you. It's not meant to be understood. It's meant to be
Right.
This is all through a translator, so I don't know exactly his exact words, but yeah, felt, experience, intimate. He used the word intimate, and I didn't think of his films as intimate, because when I think of intimacy, again, you think of, light a candle and whatever.
And
but
foreplay.
Intimate in the, whatever. But in the sense of literally like close and with you and close to you or even inside you, not in the sexual context.
Right.
But yeah.
No, I know what you mean. Maybe communion is what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Like, just
in fact, didn't I say something
one.
about on the, what time is it there? I said is coincidence. And I lifted that from Bolaño, kind of like that idea of like coincidence being like a communion with God or something like that. But yeah,
that's
no,
right. That's right.
Yeah, I definitely also reading 2666, the Bolaño novel, which I'm reading right now, was very like in a way cool to do with this Tsai retrospective, because like they both kind of, I think, are like peering into the abyss in a way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there's much more madness in 2666, I think, or if there's madness inside too, but more so like a slow drip, but anyway, of madness. But anyway, yeah, that was interesting. But yeah,
okay, so Jerry, I have to say, in the entire time I have been doing this podcast since 2022, I have never once recorded where it started raining outside.
Oh, is it raining?
It is raining. I just have to say,
you're in Florida. How the hell have you not had one happen where it starts raining?
It has never happened while I've been recording, and Tsai would appreciate this. So, I just had to point that out. But tell me, the ending. Talk about the ending, and then we'll wrap up. But I want to know I know the mural scene means so much to you.
Yeah.
But tell me why that's your. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. As you can tell, I have a lot to say about it. So when I say the ending, I mean. So there's something that happens in Stray Dogs that is a technical thing, but it's the most like my jaw drops. There's a hard cut, the only one in his filmography that I know of, or at least his feature films. I would not get into the Walker series, which I don't even think there are any cuts in that. But like when she's huddled with the children in the rain, it's a hard cut. And when I first watched it, I thought the movie was over because I didn't know like the runtime or anything. I thought, oh, that was it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. That was a good movie. But like, and then we're into this like black house and they sing happy birthday to Shao Kahn's character. And then he's in the bath and then like she's helping whoever she is. So my opinion on that is Tsai has said that because there's three women, all three of his women play. He says one character, but he also says it's three different characters. My personal interpretation is the very beginning, it's the woman from Vive l'Amour at the end. It's her.
Right.
She's brushing her hair and watching her children. The rest of the bulk of the film then is, I feel so bad I don't remember their names, but the older woman of the three who plays the mother figure in most of his films.
Right.
The third part of the
mother
film,
in Neon God.
Yes, and everything. She's like the mother in all the movies. What time is it there? Yeah, all that. And then the third section is the other actress who plays like the love interest in Wayward Cloud and all that. My thought is that the first, maybe the two younger women are the same character, but I don't personally interpret it as the older of the three, the mother character who works at the supermarket. I don't think she's the same character.
So, I mean, do you see this as like a Lost Highway situation where it's just like interchangeable, but it's the same? Like, because Lost Highway just all of a sudden is like a different actor, but they're the same person.
So I think that the end of Stray Dogs is in the past.
Okay.
That's
so
how I
see it as like a flashback.
Yes. I could be dead wrong, but that's how I personally, that's what works for me. And I don't think it will ever be concretely explained from Tsai. So that's what I
thought it was in the future because the way that the area looks to me looks futuristic. Like when he gets into that recliner and they're doing their homework on the side, the recliner looks future to me. So I thought be. Okay. But this is interesting. Okay, continue.
So the reason I think it's the past is because I don't think that woman would ever get with Shao Kahn. I mean, she finds him trying to like get his kids into a boat in the pouring rain. It's like, that's totally irresponsible. And she obviously feels like pity for him, for the children. And probably doesn't like him too much. She always just finds his kids roaming around. Her hair stinks. The daughter, she has to walk. She probably isn't the biggest fan. I doubt they would get together. That's just how,
Interesting. Okay.
So, but the hard cut, that to me is like so important. And like the camera movement in Stray Dogs is, might have been a little bit in like Rebels or at other times, but a lot of times his camera doesn't move, and it moves a lot. And then the framing, how like there's a scene later, another close up for Shao Kahn where he's like in the corner of the frame and he smokes a cigarette. And then like the framing when he breaks into that fancy high rise and he's like laying in the bed and it's like behind a window. It's such like it feels transcendent in every way. Like it transcends size, but it's also a culmination, but like it transcends his convention, it totally does away with constraint. Now, the scene in the house where, this is the reason I think it's the past, the main reason, when the mother tells her the story of the frogs, which doesn't really make sense. I'm sure it's an allegory that I'm just not smart enough to parse, but yeah. After that, she says, why is the house black? Why are the walls? Yeah. And she says, the house is sick. Every house has a story. And she's like, she's like, well, what about those white things run down? She's like, that's its tears.
And the so wrinkles.
Yeah. And so to me, it's a divorce movie at okay. That part is like, that is like a metaphor for a marriage deteriorating. She goes in and she like sprays the bathroom. She cleans it. And like, yeah, I understand that some people like keep the bathrooms really clean, wash right after but like, it's almost like she's doing it out of contempt. Like he just bathed and she's like this filthy, not like physically filthy, but like it's like a divorce. Like it's like they're falling
contempt.
Out of, yeah.
Well, yeah. And I was wondering why she did that. So I'm glad that you cleared that up, because I was like, why is she like reacting so strongly to a very normal thing that he's doing? He's literally just using their bathroom. So,
yeah.
Okay. So go ahead.
Well, go ahead. I'll just say, I think a lot of the film too, Tsai thought he was dying. And so he wanted to make one last movie. Thank God he's not. He wanted to make one last movie. It closes out the Shao Kahn saga, but he wanted to make it with all his friends. So he got all three of the women to come and play. He literally states in the same sentence that at first it was supposed to be one character, but then it turned out to be three different ones. His films change, kind of like Altman, which is like the only parallel you could ever draw between the two. They change throughout. They're like, he'll incorporate things. And apparently the ending of Stray Dogs, the very end. So after we've moved past what to me is again, like an explanation of how we got here, his divorce, like, and the house is totally a metaphor. Like they lived, that's the way the house looked because this marriage was falling apart. The house was sick, the home. Like, so after that, I think that they probably came upon the mural before the woman. But again, I mean, it's impossible to know. Like, it's impossible to say concretely. But originally, there was a big... I described it as an action-packed sequence. Now, what that means for him, I don't... I have no idea. Could have just been a 10-minute shot instead of a 20-minute one. But, and then when he found the mural, when he was location scouting, which means a lot to him, those locations, every single one is very, very precise in every film, but it totally changed. And so the last 25 or 30 minutes, whatever it is of this movie, are two shots. And they call back Vive l'Amour in a way. And they call back, I mean, like technically speaking, like in terms of the technical filmmaking, the way that the last shot is like the camera's near the roof, that reminds me of the beginning of Wayward Cloud. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just so powerful to see her when she cries at first, and then but by the end, before the cut to the last shot, it seems like she's like done, like all 7 stages of grief, all like what goes into deciding that you're done with something, or like being sad to being numb. In that 15-minute shot or whatever it is, she goes through all that.
And then walks out.
It's incredible. And then walks out, but not before we cut to him. You know, he's hugging her.
Yeah.
And then, but by that time we're behind them. And then, yeah, I mean, it's
like exit stage left, where it's just like, and the whole thing of the returning to the sea idea and all of that, because that's what she's looking at. It's almost like you feel like she just wants to go home wherever home is, and it's not with him anymore.
No.
And then he kind of follows her, even though they're not together. It just seems like a fitting end to the whole thing.
Yeah, and then we hang for a little while on just the mural.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that
Right.
it's interesting. You could talk about the juxtaposition of these ruins in this city and I mean, Taipei, if you watched like Yi Yi or other films from other directors, or even Tsai, like Rebels, Taipei doesn't always look like that. Like, he went out of his way to like find these locations that look like apocalyptic almost.
Exactly. Almost like Children of Men or something is what I think.
Yeah, which I watched recently. Mm-hmm. Love that. When that great. King Crimson song came on, that's how I knew I was in. A great movie. Yeah,
it's so good.
That's a good movie. I need to watch it again because one watch is not enough for that.
It's great.
But yeah.
It has that sort of dystopian.
Yeah, definitely. 100% like post-apocalyptic. Mm-hmm. And Tsai talked about, when talking about the film, he talked about ruins. He put a big emphasis on ruins and how every man, you know, he talks about lakes, and he talks about how if you swim to the bottom of the lake, you might find ruins.
Mm. And
how when this world ends, what will we have? If there are any of us left, the roaches, you know, that survive, what will we have left? Well, we'll have our own personal ruins, but we'll also have the ruins of the world. It's just so powerful to me. That ending to me trumps anything that, I know this sounds sacrilegious, but Tarkovsky or Tar or any of the slow cinema guys. They're not slow guys. My God. Right. Yeah. Slow cinema guys, ever did. That might be like top 5 sequence of all time for me. Maybe not Edward Yang. Cause like, have you seen A Brighter Summer Day yet?
No, but I know that,
it's 4 hours long.
The poster.
So. But there's a really good point where you can break. Yeah. There's a really good point where you can break, by the way, in that, to where.
Well, I did do Love Exposure, Jerry. And that was 4 hours.
So that should be no problem.
I can do it.
That's longer than 4 hours, I think.
Yeah, it's a little over.
Or whatever it is.
And I just did, Dogville was 3. But, okay, so the last thing I wanted to say was Jerry has great passion for Tsai Ming-liang. And I think that one of the things I was talking about with a friend of mine of he was like, well, I don't watch any of those movies because people are so snobby about them. Like when they write about them, it feels kind of condescending because it's like, if you can't get into it, you know, something's wrong with you. It couldn't possibly be the films. And so I think that part of the reason why I want to do this is because I'm just an ordinary person. And I think that if you can have an open mind and you will expose yourself. I mean, this was like baptism by fire for me.
Yeah.
And I watched 9 in a row. And I didn't really watch anything else between most of them. So this isn't like, you know, so highbrow or so weird that you can't hang on to anything. So I would say give it a chance, even if you don't feel like you're a cinephile.
Which is a term I hate. You know, honestly, I really loathe that term. I'm not a big fan of the term auteur. Because maybe James Benning would be an auteur. Stan Brakhage is definitely an auteur. But literally speaking, no, Kubrick has writers and DPs, and to me,
what you're saying,
the word means like one person. I'm being a literalist,
like
here.
Autonomy.
Yeah,
okay, I understand what you're saying.
I think it discounts. I mean, this is a minor quibble, but but in terms of the way it is used, putting my weird literalist quibbles aside, I think Tsai is the perfect example of that. His films feel singular. They feel unique. They're written and directed by him. He scouts all the locations closely. And maybe a dual authorship between him and Shao Kahn. I mean, and the provoke part of your part. Certainly. I went very literal with the interpretation and that's why I recommended the ones I did, although you ended up getting to the ones that I didn't as well initially, but because he's very provocative, but I don't think it's empty. I don't think it's for the sake of shocking, not solely. I think it's to make you think, even if you don't come to any concrete conclusions, which to me is much more interesting than saying, oh, I got it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to get it 100%. Like, I or sometimes, but like, I like mystery. Like, I like, because I hang on to those things.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're running late, but I did want to leave with a little anecdote about
Go ahead.
Vive l'Amour. So it won, let me see here. I don't want to fuck it. Venice Film Festival, is it the Golden Lion? Yes. So it won the Golden Lion in 1994. And it was a controversial decision. And when it was screened, it was met with, very polarizing reactions. And Tsai tells a story about how he won that prize. And again, there's some probably gets lost in translation, but as far as I can tell, the jury was split down the middle, with the judge being fine either way. He liked the film, but he wasn't going to, vote against it. He wasn't going to vote for it. He was just like, fine, I'll go with the majority. So it was either a split for or against, or a split, or it was 1 for and 1 against, whatever. It was going to lose, and it did share the prize with another film that year. But anyway, the day after the initial voting, one of the jury members called the judge and said, "I actually want to vote for Vive l'Amour. It's a powerful film, and I think that this jury member didn't like it initially." But she said, "No, this is good. I want this." And so that's how it ended up winning. And that judge was David Lynch. And that jury member was Uma Thurman. So Uma Thurman is the reason that it won, really.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and there were other members of the jury, most of whom I don't know. There's a filmmaker, I don't even want to botch his name, Olivier something. He did Irma Vep, Cold Water.
Oh yeah, Assayas?
Assayas, is that how you say it? I didn't want to botch it.
That's
it might be.
It, but
I'll let you botch it. But yeah,
Klaus
he was on the jury.
Sils Maria. Yeah.
Yeah. I need to see more from him. But yeah, so that's a cool story there that I figured, and that's not as
awesome.
heady.
Right.
Just leave us with that. So.
Well, and it also just shows how like everything comes down to, so much has to do with luck, and like things going your way is just, it's amazing that anything works out. There's so many moving parts, moving pieces, and all that stuff. So that's a great way to end it. I would recommend this experience if you guys are trying to branch out into territory you didn't know. And Jerry, thank you for this. It could have gone south, and it did a little bit, but not too bad for me. So I appreciate this exercise just for my own edification as well.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you enjoyed it. I enjoyed going through them again. Enjoyed our talk, and I'm just really, I was selfishly picked Tsai because I love his films, and not enough people have seen them. And you don't have to be like a cinephile or whatever. You can be a normal person and enjoy them, and maybe be disturbed by them, or maybe be moved by them, or maybe be just put off by how artsy they are, whatever. But take a dip.
Check them out.
You might be glad you did.
With that, thank you, Jerry. Pleasure as always, and we'll see you at the movies.